So, Andrew Keener, thank you so much for taking the time to join FORTE podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here
Pleasure to have you here.
in your lovely studio, in your lovely office.
Well, it's my consolation and retreat from the world.
Yeah. I just wanted to start briefly at your time at university. It's something I've been reflecting on too after graduating for the final time for my master's 2 years ago. And it's sort of sobered me up that I won't be in education anymore for the rest of my life, probably. When I was at university, I heard the phrase go about that university would be the best days of your life. And at the University of Edinburgh alumni website, I saw that you said university was also the best days of your life. I wondered why it was for you.
Well, I was brought up in Southeast Wales, in Barry, into a with a very loving pair of parents. And I was very lucky also in Barry Boys Comprehensive to have a wonderful music teacher, O-level and A-level music teacher, who taught me the vocabulary of music in a way which state schools don't now, mostly. And so when I went away 400 miles north to Edinburgh, it was, despite the fact that being home was lovely, it was a lovely home, I felt liberated. I'm an only child. And it was, to use a horrible cliche, it was instantly the University of Life as well as the University of my chosen subject. And the fact that I was able to be free from anything in my home life, if you like, and to be able to make the friends I wanted to. We're talking about early 1970s South Wales that I'd left, and long before you were born, but growing up gay in Southeast Wales and suddenly going to a university city 400 miles away, meeting friends and learning things I didn't know. I'm not talking about my music, but that too, was such a liberation. It was a social and academic liberation all in one go. And it was the best 3 years of my life academically. I mean, wonderful things that would have happened to me since then. But it was an education, an all-round education. In a city I fell in love with on site. And I lived there till 1979. And that was possibly one of the happiest decades in all of my life.
Was there any pivotal moments during your time in Edinburgh that you still remember?
Pivotal moments?
Yes. In terms of music or in terms of finding out who you are as a person?
Pivotal moments. I think meeting one particular friend who I still keep in touch with. We were very, very similar, very, very similar musically. Sir Donald Runnels, the conductor who was in the same year as I was, and we still keep in touch. And our view on music and its importance in life, I think, was and is very, that was a pivotal moment meeting him. Other than that, it was a general feeling of liberation. That decade.
Yeah. And you said that also that a good producer must have people skills.
Oh, yeah.
So back then, reflecting on your early life, was people skills something you always had, or was it something you had to work on?
I think this is an awful thing to say, because people are damaged by bullying. But I was bullied in school very badly. And I think if it did me any good, it was to make me perhaps able to see other people's sensitivities. And I think one of the essentials, as you've implied just now, of doing the job I do, working with musicians as a record producer, is that you have to be able to read people and to react with them and behave with them accordingly to that person, whoever he or she is. Yeah, of course, to be a record producer worthy of the name, you've got to have a good pair of ears, and you've got to be able to read the score, and you've got to be able to hear what you read score-wise. But I think without the people skill in that job, then it's worthless, because you have to, like all areas of life which involve dealing with people, whether you're a diplomat or whether you're the best kind of politician, or even a record producer, it's about being able to get the best out of people and making them want to give you their best. And I think if my slightly rough third, fourth, and fifth form in comprehensive school, it's not an indictment of comprehensive schools, taught me anything, I think it opened my eyes to the feelings of other people. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yeah, that does make sense. To be able to put yourself in another person's shoes, and
that was indeed a learning curve. Yeah.
Yeah. And also the benefits of university is that you get to enhance that feeling of putting yourself in other people's shoes, is that you get to meet people from all over the world, from different cultures with also different sensitivities. So
yes, absolutely. It's more now the case in academia now, isn't it? Because I'm talking about the 70s, of course, and in the 70s, the influx of people from other cultures in university life was far less than it is now. I'd be fascinated to know that I'd be fascinated to be in as an undergraduate now for that reason, because the influx and the melting pot of people from other cultures, undergraduates from other cultures, is something astonishing. But I was where I was, and it was wonderful.
When you were studying music, at that time, were your ambitions headed towards being a record producer, or were they headed somewhere else?
I was always absolutely nuts about records. In December 1968, my parents put into my Christmas stocking a copy of the Gramophone, December 1968 magazine. And this was Damascene. I opened it, and the first thing I thought, what are these? These are record reviews. What is a record review? I was 14. What's 1954 from 68? 14. And the concept that there was, the idea there was such a thing as a record review, well, if it's on record, it must be good, mustn't it? The concept of a critic, whether it be a film critic, a theatre critic, a record critic, was alien to me. And this opened my eyes tremendously. And I was collecting records from earlier than that. They were pop singles. I remember buying The Animals, The House of the Rising Sun, and Cliff Richard, Travelling Light, and Dynamite, and was fascinated by these. And I would be very, very disdainful of my loving parents, saying, they had a small classical collection in the house. You don't want to listen to this, Mum. It's this museum music. And they would try and interest me in Rimsky-Korsakov, Scheherazade, or Beethoven Pastoral Symphony. And then I had this wonderful music teacher in Barry Boys Comprehensive School who made me, not his fault, but I became an insufferable snob for a while. Oh, Mum and Dad, you don't want the Karajan version of Beethoven's Pastoral. The Clara Kleiber one is so much more refined. Terrible. But I became fascinated by records, to return to your question, from a very early age. And whereas other kids would be kicking a football round, I would lock myself in my bedroom and wonder why this recording of the Elgar Cello Concerto, I spent all my pocket money on these things, why this recording of, say, the Elgar Cello Concerto was different from that one, Jacqueline Dupre versus Pierre Fournier, for instance. And why is the cello more forward in that recording? And so this fostered my fascination for records. So I went to read music at Edinburgh on this tailwind of fascination for records. And I did some amateur recording in Edinburgh, terrible stuff, on the faculty equipment, a lovely Revox A77. Some people will remember that. I've still got one upstairs, reel-to-reel tape recorder. And then when I graduated, I drifted mindlessly into teacher training because I'd admired my O-level and A-level music teacher in Barry Boys Comp. Big mistake, because I was a crap teacher, absolutely terrible. Class music, I wanted them to love my art as much as I did. That's not the essence of great teaching. The essence of great teaching is to lead out, ducare, Latin, rather than impose. And so I ran screaming from the profession after 18 months and went to work at a record shop in London, and slept on the floor of a madhouse in Clapham, which one of the other inhabitants was Sir Donald Runnicles as he was then. And I got to know the great and the good of the recording industry then, working in this record shop. It was called EMG Handmade Gramophones. You may have heard of it. It was a gentleman's record shop. They didn't have anything as vulgar as browsers. You had to ask what you wanted. And if that recording that you wanted wasn't recommended by their house magazine, we do not recommend it, therefore we do not stock it. But this all went into the melting pot of fostering my fascination, enhancing my fascination with records. And also several people were very good to me, who came in the shop, mentored me, and perhaps saw through the fact that, when one is that age, you don't necessarily know the depth of your own ignorance, and therefore you're confident. And it can make you seem horribly bumptious, but obviously some people saw through that horrible bumptiousness and helped me. People like, Ted Perry, who founded Hyperion Records, Robert Layton, the Sibelius expert, Simon Foster, the aforementioned Simon Foster, who was an EMI classic, was in Classics for Pleasure at the time, and then founded Virgin Classics. And these people were very good to me. John Lade of Record Review, the guy that did Building a Library on the Saturday Morning, predecessor of the person who does it now, Andrew McGregor. And so I started to go to recording sessions. And gosh, that's what producing a recording does. The guy sits in the box, says when it's out of tune down the talk back to the studio, and asks for retakes. Yeah. And gosh, that looks so easy. And Ted Perry of Hyperion, bless him, gave me my first break. He came into the record shop one day, and said, I'm starting a new record label, Andrew. And I said, with all the depth of ignorance, all the depth of the confidence of somebody who doesn't know the depth of his own ignorance, I said, oh, do you want a producer? Yeah, all right. And I messed up his first record for him royally. I was led in tears from the third day of recording session at 3 a.m. Because I didn't have the technique to deal with an artist in the grip of his nerves. This was a pianist, very good pianist, now no longer with us, Chopin studies. I bowed to every one of his wishes. Oh, I don't want take numbers, Andrew. I don't want to know about take numbers. Of course, absolutely. Oh, and I want to jump about from one side to the other. If I feel that I can do this by now, yes, of course. The proper answer would have been, there's a protocol in the recording studio. There's an order of doing things. But of course, I was in the thrall of the artist. I'm still in the thrall of artists, but I hope I have the technique to guide. And dear Ted Perry, Hyperion creator, gave me a second chance. And I learnt just enough to not mess up. And so I think it's interesting, isn't it? And this is always stream of consciousness, isn't it, Anthony? I'm sorry about this. No. It's interesting that now there are courses for some time now, some decades. There are courses for engineers, recording engineers. Tormeister course in the University of Surrey is one. But when I was encountering the people who were producing records and engineering records at that time, there were as many ways of getting into it as there were people doing it. There were no courses. There was no, in recording techniques. People learnt from the people around them, and that's interesting. I think it's something I was on the cusp of between that and there being the start of recording courses. So I I think there's much to be said for absorbing and making mistakes, and not necessarily accumulating a CV through a course. Anyway.
Sometimes when you're thrown in the deep end, that's where you learn the
Yeah.
most, and that's when lessons become more permanent.
That's a very good point. I think it is, because it's a cliche, but well, it's a cliche, isn't it, to say that most cliches are cliches because they're true, that what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. And I think if you have knocks, it teaches you something about yourself, and it may sober you for a long time. It may wound you, and it may leave you with lovely white scar tissue. But it enables you to see past your last mistakes to what you shouldn't do next time.
Did you feel, I guess, going back to your first ever break that you had being a producer, was there a sense of nervousness or anxiety?
Oh, yeah, tremendous. Yes. I think another early session, I remember my first, or was it maybe my second, orchestral session with the LSO, who we're talking early 80s, and they were all male in those days. And the LSO, rightly or wrongly in those days, had something of a reputation for being a wonderful orchestra, but, there was something gangsterish. I could hear my voice getting higher and higher on the talkback, asking for retakes. And at one point, I started talking too much, a bit like now, really. And I was saying, it would have been quite sufficient for me to have said down the talkback, it's not together on the second beat of bar 64. No, not enough. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not together on the second beat of bar 64, because the oboe makes it slightly before the seconds, and I think actually the oboe's ahead. It's the seconds are right, and the oboe. I could hear myself talking. I couldn't stop, and I looked up at the monitor. I was really a bag of nerves, and I looked up at the monitor, which was trained on the rostrum, the conductor's rostrum, and it was empty. And the next thing I knew, I felt it was a Welsh conductor. That helped. The next thing I knew, there were these thumbs in my shoulder blades. And he said, "No, don't worry, man. You're doing fine. Calm down now. You're doing fine." And I returned to the comment we were sharing, that these things, the combination of being knocked and combination of people who think you're not a total idiot and therefore want to support you, it's important to see them both and learn from them.
Did you go back the second time feeling a bit more?
Yeah, every time. You mean for the next recording?
Yes.
Oh yeah, yes. You still make mistakes, but you learn to cover them better.
And what about now? Do you still feel a bit of, I guess, a modicum of nerves now when you do your job?
It depends completely on nerves. Depends what you mean by nerves. If you mean fear, no. Nerves. If you mean by nerves a certain heightened feeling of anticipation, yeah. Otherwise you're dead. The slightly less unrefined answer to that is it depends on, a rather more banal answer to that, is it depends how well prepared I am. If it's music which I know intimately, not in the sense of being able to conduct it. I couldn't conduct a bus. I've done it twice for charity and everybody had a good laugh. But in the vicarious sense, of knowing how a score's put together and knowing from an outsider's point of view exactly what the score's made up of. And if it's with an artist I have worked with a lot and I love and who seems to like what I do, then one goes into it with a certain joy. That's not to say the heightened aspect of it is lessened, but it is a certain joyousness. But when, if ever I am nervous in the sense that you, I think, meant, in other words, fear, it's because, let's say I'm recording with an artist who is, well, a producer killer, recording music that I only had the score of a week ago and I've never heard in my life, and there is no recording of it that I can mug up, then to be quite honest, one has to bring to bear a certain amount of technique to get by and to reassure people that you're not being a total plonker. That's what acquiring technique over the decades means. It's the same in any job, isn't it? I mean, the same, I come back to the politician, diplomat, interviewer, artist, pianist like you, broadcaster like you. You have to be a chameleon in that sense, to be able to give the same impression of professionalism, whether in here you're thinking, oh God, yes, what do I say next? Well, the face is just like that. But when you're in your comfort zone, like I am recording 4 Williams symphonies, then this becomes, this face becomes less of an effort to preserve.
Because it's in line with your inner self. It's in line.
Exactly so.
There's no need to hold two faces. Yeah.
Yes. Well,
I'm so glad you brought that back up, because when I read people skills on the interview of the University of Edinburgh, I interpreted it as it could either be introversion or extroversion. I think both people can be possessive of people skills. I think introverts are not necessarily shy of people. They still know how to manage people and interact with people. And so do extroverts in both their own ways. So I wanted to know, Andrew, do you identify yourself as an introverted person? Someone who's focused on the internal feelings and the internal world? Or are you an extrovert who feeds off social interactions of other people?
Does it sound presumptuous to say a bit of both? Aren't we all a bit of both?
No, of course not.
I look inwards a lot. I probably think about death every day.
So do I.
That's nice. How old are you? You're just a babe. Well, when I was your age, I thought about death every day. I look inwards a lot. I think I'm the combination of my parents. My mother was, broad brushstroke description. My mother was an extrovert. She was the one who would fly off the handle more. Very passionate woman, very warm. My father was the thoughtful one. It's been said that I look like my father, but use my face like my mother. And so I'm an extrovert when I'm around people who I deem to be on my wavelength. Like in the recording studio when it's going really well, I would talk to an orchestra in an extrovert way. They know me. The orchestras that know me know me. And oh yes, Keena. But if one equates aspects of being a worrier with aspects of being an introvert, then yes.
Do you think sort of classical music classical music favors one type of personality over the other?
What an interesting question.
Because I know in some industries, extroversion is favored, especially in the classroom, for instance. The students who are more outspoken, who are more vocal about their opinions, so they get more attention, get more opportunities, and the people who are introverted and keeping themselves to themselves are.
But don't you think an artist has, I'm talking about artists, which is the breed of human beings I know best, musical artists. Don't you think that artists, if they're going to succeed, this may be a sad thing to say, need to be absolutely both, have both sides. In order to be an artist who communicates to his or her listener in a way which says, let me take you by the hand, the journey that I'm experiencing is your journey too, because we're both human beings. Don't you think that an artist has to do that, but at the same time, in order to stand up on a rostrum or on a stage alone with a piano has to have some kind of extrovert ego, to be able to stand up and do it at all. And so I think the artist is privileged and damned in equal measure by needing to be both. If that makes sense.
Yes.
And I think an artist who, even somebody like the great conductor Carlo Maria Giulini, who, when he was chief conductor of this or that orchestra, Los Angeles Philharmonic, for instance, would say, I don't want to have anything to do with the administration. I will concentrate just on the music. The music from the heart, to paraphrase, to quote Beethoven, will go from the heart to the heart. But he knew what the career was about. He was, if you only have to look at the studio photographs of him. He knew exactly how to present himself. This is not a qualitative judgment, but he when he gave interviews, the sort of Saint Carlo Maria Giulini persona was very much to the fore. I'm humble, but you can't be uncomplicatedly humble if you're going to give something to the public and stand up knowing that you can do it.
Well, I do agree that there's a fine line between the two. Yeah, like a nice mix. And you did freelance journalism.
Yes.
And you also did programs, gramophone programs.
Yes, I broadcast a bit. I was a fairly good broadcaster, not top flight by any means. I did, the building a library part of the record review program on Saturday morning, which has been going for decades. I did some of those. I wrote for concert reviews for The Guardian, Musical Times, Records and Recording, and I reviewed records for Hi-Fi News and EMG Monthly Letter. This is before the record production career took off. A lot of people authors review books, and that's accepted. It was less accepted, and I think it's not altogether good that critics should produce record reviewers should produce records. It's very difficult. I was asked a while back, would I be interested in doing building a library, and it's very difficult, especially with 1,500 records under my belt, to choose a work to compare versions of a work which I haven't recorded. That would be horribly unacceptable. No, I enjoyed being a journalist from about 1979 to 1982, but it was a very tense thing. I don't know what it's like now. You must tell me. Writing concert reviews for The Guardian before mobile phones, and one would come out of the festival hall being transported to another planet after perhaps hearing a great conductor like Raphael Kubelik doing Brooklyn 9, and you'd have to go into a pea-sodden phone box underneath Hungerford Bridge and phone in your copy. And there is nothing more inane, at least I don't think there is, than hearing yourself read your own deathless prose slowly. and the first one I had, the very first is a baptism of total fire. The first copy I ran, it was Brooklyn 9, Kubelik. And I suppose it wasn't. There was Mozart in the first half and a new work to open. It was aleatoric. You know what aleatoric means. And I went into, sure as I ever was, I went into this phone box with a fistful of 10-pence pieces. This was 1980. Not knowing that I should reverse the charges, because the Guardian could afford it. And so shoving these in, so, Guardian. It's Andrew Keener here with copy of the Arts Desk. Hello, it's Andrew Keener here with copy of Byline. What do you mean, sir? It's very, very aggressive Glaswegian guy taking my copy. I said, okay, it's London Symphony Orchestra, Raphael Kubelik, Festival Hall. Aye. Okay, shall I start? Aye. So I started, and I came to the word Mozart, and he said, how'd you spell that? And so I spelt it. And I came to the word aleatoric, And I said, okay for spelling. What do you think I am? Do you think I'm stupid or something? And he covered over the phone and he started shouting to the room at large, who is this guy? Kinnear. Oh, and I imagine this bank of typists pissing themselves laughing, you know, that this plonker was on the other end of his phone. And I staggered out of this phone box and went into the National Film Theatre and had a double whiskey. And that was my baptism phoning through copy. And the next night I was at the Barbican, and I thought, right, the Guardian's around the corner from the Barbican, as it was then. I think it was then. I'll go in, and I'll go in and type my copy up. And I was shown up to this first floor cubicle. I was the only one there. What a swine he was. He was the only one there that night. He was just pretending to mock me to a room full of mocking people. So anyway, so I learned quickly. And the next night I phoned it through, and there was this wonderful fagash little woman. Said, hello, it's Andrew Keane. I've got a copy from the Barbican. Oh no, she said. I've just had, and she mentioned another critic. I've just had Fred Bloggs with his passionate bloody lyricism. Now I got another music critic coming on the line, and she was very funny. It's very different now, of course, isn't it? I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all from home. It's all, yeah. But those were the we might say radio days of phoning in copy from a public phone box after a concert, trying to crystallize your thoughts in 20 minutes after being moved. I wasn't sorry to get rid of that part of it.
Right. Was it that process that put you off, or was it something else that?
Well, to be quite honest, although I enjoyed doing record reviews, but I ran out of things to say. There are critics who've been doing it for years and still write wonderfully. I mean, the not so long ago dearly missed and departed Michael Kennedy, the great writer on Elgar and Vaughan Williams, a writer, a music critic, a great record critic, to a great humanity, biographer, and warmth and simplicity. But when I started finding myself rooting round for the best adjectives, then that's the end. And two adjectives, an adverb and an adjective in the same sentence. Wonderfully mystical. Okay, what are you doing now? Where's my Roger? What's better? What's another word for mystical? No, I was not glad. I was not sorry to see the back of that.
That's so true. I mean, I was tasked to write a music review, a CD review, for a very small publishing website, music website, and I'm sorry to say, but I just found it very difficult to write. Maybe it's just me. I found it very difficult to describe the music I was listening to, and to critique it.
Do you remember what the music was?
It was a rock band, actually. It was a very up and coming rock band from Bath, I think. And I was tasked to review one of their new singles, and for the life of me, for the same reasons, I just couldn't find enough adjectives the adequate adjectives to describe what I was listening to. Without
lapsing into cliche as well.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. It's very difficult. I still write a bit, the odd thing, the Algar Society Journal, but and I enjoy that, but pumping it out night after night, it's very hard not to become formulaic and repetitive and windy. So, whatever faults I've got now, maybe I'm windy in the recording booth. Probably I still talk too much, but I think I've run out of things to say.
Yeah, I did too.
Oh no, I'm so young.
So, no more CD reviewing for me for the
really?
For the time being.
Never say never.
Well, I think I prefer to do book reviews instead, or film reviews. But CD music reviews, I just can't do.
So what's the difference then in your mind?
Well, I think the book reviews I read, the book reviews I love actually, are the book reviews from Christopher Hitchens, the late journalist. The reason I love it is because there's historical context. There's humor. And there's something quite essayistic about it that I don't really get from CD reviews, say, in magazines. There's something quite... I think, I know it's reviewing, there's criticism involved in CD reviewing, but when I read good book reviews, it's not all criticism.
Exactly.
There's a mixture of historical context, good insight from history and relating it to what you're listening to now. And there's a very nice attempt of the author to try and make you understand where this work sits.
I think it's partly the nature of the relative beasts, isn't it? Because if you're a record reviewer reviewing a new recording of Beethoven Eroica, you're going to talk about the genesis of that work and its place in history far less, if at all, than if you're reviewing a new biography of somebody who has been written about perhaps once, twice, no more times before. So you do place that author in history, in political and social history, whereas it's not expected, is it, of somebody writing a 300-word record review on Beethoven Eroica to talk about Napoleon.
No.
And Beethoven's reaction to Napoleon making himself emperor. And so I think that's where the world of book reviews and film reviews as well offers far more scope for contextualizing the actual subject.
Yes.
Rather than, in the case of music, the performance, which is people who read a review of Beethoven Eroica just want to know how it compares with the million other recordings that there have been over the century of recording.
Right,
yeah.
Right. No, that's a good point. But I think there is scope for that crossover between book reviewing and CD reviewing. And I think I'll enjoy a CD review more if there was some context.
Interesting, yes. There is with a new work, of course, in a proper review of a new CD of a new previously unrecorded work by a living composer, yeah. There is scope for that, and the scope should be taken.
Yeah.
Record reviewing the danger of record reviewing is that it gets very parochial, and I speak as a complete anorak. I wear my record anorak quite a lot. I've got a friend who we swap catalogue numbers. ASD 655. Oh yeah, Jacqueline Dupre, Algar Concerto. ASD 3374. Oh, Carry On Sibelius Tone Poems. It's really, the word of the sad git. And I don't think that exists quite so much in the critical world of the other arts. There's a book called, I may have it on my shelf still. I think it's called The Queen's Throat. And it's basically written by this, it's very absorbing to anoraks like me. It's written by this chap who is a complete, vinyl is in his veins, as it is in mine. And it's basically the journey of an obsession with records. This performance, that performance, how that soprano tackles a high A, and this soprano tackles, and it's absolutely parochial. It's the kind of train spotterism that I can't think is surpassed by any of the other arts. It's a particular record nutter thing. I'm afraid I've got it. I mean, behind you there, in front of me, is shelf loads of vinyl. I still play them, still cherish them. God knows where they go when I pop off.
And can you locate where a particular record is?
Yes.
You can.
Yeah, instantly. It's really sad. I really do have a life, Anthony. I really do, honestly.
I'm not saying you don't. I'm not saying you don't. I'm not saying you don't. I have to ask the last question now. I wish we could talk much longer.
Yeah, this is fun.
If you can ask one person, dead or alive, anyone you like, one question to find out an answer that you're dying to know, to whom would you ask that question?
How many people have said Hitler? Why? Has anybody said that to you?
No.
No. That wouldn't be my choice either, but I would have thought it would be quite... I'm surprised it hasn't come up when we're talking about game changers of that malevolence. Two answers, I suppose. One is trivial. I would ask Elgar what is the enigma, and he would probably say there isn't one. The hidden, what he said about the enigmations. Over and above the theme, another theme goes but is not played. And it's musicologists have now, thank God, given up trying to, because it probably was just him being cryptic or even playful. The serious one, that's very difficult, Anthony. You may have to edit this great long pause out.
Take your time.
I would ask my father, who died in 2006. I would ask him about his work in the war, Second World War. He didn't fight, nor was he a conscientious objector. He looked after some electrical equipment. He worked for REME, which was electrical corps. And when I asked him, I stopped asking him, what did you do in the war, Dad? When I was about 16, I should have persisted, because he always used to answer, I used to look after electrical equipment. But why? And I imagine whether there was any shame he felt, I don't know. Something he never talked about. Maybe there's no shame involved at all. Maybe it was complete face value. I would ask that. Yeah. Is that good enough? Yeah.
That's perfect, Andrew. Well, Andrew Keener, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony. This has been, well, it didn't touch the sides. It went down so easily. Thank you.
My pleasure.